have you all got composting bins in your gardens? And yeah. Do you find it quite like successful, easy, tricky, slow?
Mine are too, in my own garden, too new yet. I'm just adding stuff to it now. The one in the permaculture garden, we've got open compost leaves, and we've got a closed Dalek looking one, a black plastic one. But that's the one I've only ever seen life in. When you open the lid and you see all the life scuttering around inside the compost, that's the only time I've seen that.
Right. Because it's such a, I find it tricky here as well, that it's such a communal effort, you know, like it is quite a lot, it takes a lot of time making sure you've got all those different components, ripping up your cardboard, whatever it is you're doing. Making sure, chopping all the plant material up. When I see people lifting, you know, like how absolutely gigantic brassicas get, and then like people just put it in the compost. No, that's not going to do anything. It's going to take years to like decompose. Which is why the dead hedge here has been an absolute lifesaver, because for all those like huge woody, a lot of stuff that if we're clearing bits of land and like cutting, you know, different things, not just the food growing, that all goes onto the dead hedge. So I feel like a broken record sometimes when I'm like, take that to the dead hedge, take that to the dead hedge. Because actually the compost bins here, I'll show you them, but they're 6, they're quite big, but they fill up so quickly if you're putting all of that kind of material in it. So I'm quite precious about, actually it's mainly the food waste from the kitchen and any food scraps that are generated from growing. They're basically the 2 key sources of our like nitrogen.
Do you get enough here for your needs, or do you have to buy any in?
So when I first started in December 21, I brought in a load of municipal compost from the council, and that is still in the like behind the polytunnels. When it first was delivered, it is notoriously dry, so I know those growers have ordered this, and then it's been just because they kind of have to like nuke it, you know, to the point where there's absolutely nothing in there. So it's just this very strange dry material. You know, there's quite a lot of like woodiness in it. So now it's been, you know, 18 months sat there. It's definitely darker and richer, and it's kind of it's got loads of weeds in it. But it's definitely like now when we dig some parts of it out, there is like worms and there is lots in it now.
So you almost have to recompost it.
So the compost that we generate in our own bins, it's not masses, but it kind of does for the scale of what we need it for, because we don't compost the whole garden all at the same time. We tend to kind of put compost quite randomly in beds depending on what it's looking like. The difference between the cold and hot composting, in my garden at home I've got one of those Dalek things, and it's just a cold compost pile. I never rotate it. The hot composting system comes from rotating and moving it, so you're constantly allowing that life and those microbes to access kind of more food stuffs, and it just keeps that metabolism at a certain level that keeps generating that heat, and then it's the kind of runaway effect. The more heat, then the more it kind of the quicker it breaks down. So the more you can turn, if you've got that space and you've got that opportunity, the quicker your compost will be made. And then the 2 other ones, the leaf mould, we don't actually do that here. We totally could, because we've got enough trees to collect, but it's whether the opportunity presents itself. It takes a while. Well, the dry leaves themselves like break down quite quickly, but it's just like gathering, having enough like space to gather it all. And then our wormeries, we've just got one here, but I'll show you. I think they're brilliant for like small scale processing of cooked food waste. So our cooked food here goes into our wormery, which is like an old wheelie bin. So for any of you that, you know, like I've got a small one at home, that's in, you know, those food waste bins that go over the council to collect those like brown, and it's got that locking handle. I've submerged one of those in my garden at home, and that's enough for the like small bit of cooked food waste that we generate.
Do you find you get problems with rats? Because every time we've tried compost with food waste, we've had rats nesting in the compost bin.
Yes. Actually, in our 6 compost bays here, we had a rat's nest in it last year, and a volunteer was turning it, and then there was 6 baby rats. So yeah, totally. I mean, this is like an urban place, right? You can't avoid it in a lot of ways. But trying as much as possible to make sure every time I empty the food waste bin, I make sure to put a whole barrow of wood chip on top, so it just submerges the smell and the chance for the rats to find it. And that has helped since we've been a bit more rigorous with that this summer. And then keeping lids weighted down, keeping compost piles covered as much as possible, that all helps with that.
We've got a dead hedge in the forest garden. It's not massive. It's been really useful, but we've ended up putting green stuff on it as well, and then it all sort of down. But I don't know if that doesn't really fall. It falls between one thing and the other. I don't know what's going to happen to it. It's only been there, what is it, just over a year and a half?
Yeah.
But it's definitely kind of gone down, so I don't know
that's
whether
great. I mean, ours does that as well. It depends really what you need to use it for, right? If you've got loads of green waste that you need to nurture.
I also try and do that chop and drop thing where any weedy stuff, chuck it behind a tree or something.
Yeah.
Is that good for insects? I gathered it was.
And also good for if you're doing an orchard in agroforestry, forest garden thing. It's great to have that mulch around your trees.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
as long as it's not got any seeds in it.
it's a bindweed.
Oh, bindweed. Okay.
Well, there is a bit of bindweed, but
I'll talk more about that when we have a walk around, because bindweed is my absolute nemesis here. I feel like my job is just controlling bindweed a lot of the time. I always think that you need more carbon than you do nitrogen, but loads of people, there's a range of opinions on this. But yeah, essentially there's loads of different sources in which you can find your carbon ingredient, and it's mainly food waste, right? That plant remains that you find the nitrogen from. And things like animal manure, even though it's brown, actually is much more nitrogen heavy than it is carbon. And things like coffee grinds as well, even though it's brown, because this tends to be the way that carbon is brown and nitrogen is green, but it can be a bit blurred sometimes.
I stopped putting coffee grounds in my compost because apparently they are allelopathic. I don't know if I'm saying that word right.
What, sorry?
Allelopathic, maybe. It's means that they have a kind of chemical in them that inhibits other plant growth, like walnuts and coffee and tea and other things chocolate also apparently has an inhibiting effect on other plant growth.
That's interesting.
And that is a new thing to me, so I don't know if that's something that other people have heard or not.
No.
Yeah, because I use used coffee ground. Basically, a local cafe at the end of the day saves their used coffee grounds. They put them in bags, and every now and again I go and collect them. And I put them on compost bins in the permaculture garden and in mine. And I also look after some flower beds in Thornbury for Thornbury in Bloom. So I actually spread them round all the flowers. And they've said this year it's actually worked, the flowers are that much better.
Oh really?
Not
Okay.
the actual slugs, it's actually as a little bit of a plant food. I said, can I use it or not? And they said, give it a go. And they've all commented on how well the flowers are looking.
Right.
Okay.
So, I don't know. I mean, you wouldn't do it every week, every month, but it's the sort of thing, once or twice a season, to put some down. It must have something in it to help.
Yeah.
It might also
that
have
goes
an
against
effect.
what I heard then, so
Yeah.
But everybody's experiences are going to be slightly different because your soils are going to be very different, and it might have a kind of weed suppressing effect as well if you do it under perennial vegetable or fruit bushes or something. Yeah, and then we never put in our compost bindweed, horsetail or couch grass. The trio, the trio of doom here. Yeah, we always pile those three up separately, sheet it over or put it in like an old compost bag and let the roots and let the plant material die off completely. And then once it's dead, you can tell like the root doesn't snap, it's just kind of smushy. And that can then go on your dead hedge. I try basically just say to, again like a broken record with it, never put bindweed or horsetail or couch grass in the compost, because we have such an issue with those three here that even if there's a slim chance, you know, I don't want to risk it to like keep spreading that around site. So yeah. And then just a nod towards the different kind of compost you use for seed sowing and propagation actually. So the compost you make out in your compost bin generally just goes straight onto the ground, into your beds. But seed compost is a growing media that doesn't actually provide, it's not particularly nutritious, because seeds at this point have everything they need to germinate. So the seed compost is just kind of it's just like an incubating space, right? So ideally it's quite fine and not too many like big lumps in it. This is the stuff we use here, and I've bought. This is like the commercial packaging, the more domestic one. It's just a really nice one, it's got great texture to it.
Can you use your own compost to plant seeds? Your homemade compost out here?
You can. I think the reason why we don't is that it's so inconsistent in terms of its texture, and seeds don't really like things like big bulky things in the way. So I've experienced quite poor germination with homemade compost, which is why I think seed compost is worthwhile in like investing in to make sure propagation is as easy as possible, because you've got so many things against you at that point, you know. So yeah, make life easy and like buy some decent propagation compost. Yeah. Because the seeds won't actually come up through the compost if it's too chunky and.
Is it too rich as well?
Yeah, that's also a possibility. That sometimes if it's too rich and it gets waterlogged very easily, then the seeds will just rot. So it needs to be quite well draining and all that kind of thing. So I just wanted to touch on this idea of like observation and taking notice of different times of the year. I'm still like, this whole thing is such a lifelong journey, right? Learning so much all the time, especially since being here and talking to people that have been doing growing for like decades, and trying to get into this rhythm of the sort of annual rhythm and taking notice of things. So like when snowdrops come up in early in the year, the ground is starting to thaw, the weather it doesn't feel warm, but the ground is warming, and so this is a bit of a signal then to start sowing your seeds into modules in the house, in your polytunnel, in your greenhouse. And then keep an eye out for that last forecasted frost, which often now is into May. And then the hawthorn blossom, a bit later on, is a signal that basically everything is warm, like the ground is completely thawed, things are warm enough that you can start to sow directly. And I just try to give myself these like chunks of time for different focuses, so that's sort of this part of the year, right, is like reflection, learning, practically thinking about winter pruning, maintenance, bed prep. You're kind of like gearing yourself, you're sort of resting but also gearing yourself, like trying to kind of meet both of those needs. And then this part of the year is kind of seed sowing, planning, dreaming, and then at this point it's sort of you don't have time to think. So, you know, like as much as possible, be kind to yourself in these parts of the year. So do as much for yourself. This is like, I'm sort of talking to myself at this point. Do as much for yourself as you can, so that this part of the year doesn't feel quite so like, frenetic.
Yeah.
And this for me, I want this list to continue, right? I want to continue to learn about like what are the observational seasonal changes, because things are now shifting. That it isn't such a hard-fast rule now that like, okay, this time of the year I start sowing. Actually, when the hawthorn blossom is out, then I know things are warm enough, and that might be different, you know, as the years progress.